So, as we all should know by now, My Hero Academia has just ended with its final chapter releasing not too long ago, officially concluding the story of Izuku Midoriya and the rest of Class 1A. And whether or not you love the ending or you absolutely hate it, you have to admit that My Hero Academia left some pretty big questions unanswered, which may just lead us right into a sequel spin-off series. And when I say big questions, no, I'm not talking about Deku's dad. Nobody cares that his identity wasn't revealed. That doesn't change anything about the story. He was mentioned one time. I don't get why so many people care about finding out who this random dude was. He just turned out to be a regular nobody who abandoned his son. Nothing more than that. Anyways, sorry about that little rant, but there are two really big questions, or you could say concepts, that weren't explored enough in My Hero Academia, and both of them have to do with the existence of quirks. The first big question that is left unanswered is, where in the hell did quirks come from? Because all the story tells us is that quirks one day magically appeared. One day, a random person was born glowing, ended up having a quirk, and after that, everyone had quirks. So, we're not really given much of an explanation as to where quirks came from. We don't know anything about them or their origin. All we know is that one day, people woke up and boom, quirks existed and the world changed forever. And I know it's not necessary for an anime to reveal where its power system originates from. Majority of animes don't. For example, in Jujutsu Kaisen, we don't know where cursed energy comes from. In One Piece, we don't know where Haki comes from. In Bleach, we do know where Reiatsu comes from technically, but you guys get the picture. But here's the thing with My Hero Academia. You can't just say that one day quirks appeared, because we know that quirks did not exist at one point in time. So something must have happened for quirks to just manifest in the world. And we want to know why. That's why it's important to learn the origin of quirks. Because we know that at one point quirks didn't exist. Meanwhile, all these other series, for all we know, the power system could have been around from the start of time. The next big question, or more so concept I should say, that wasn't explored enough, or was actually barely explored, was the concept of the quirk singularity theory. This was mentioned several times throughout My Hero Academia, and for those of you who don't know what the quirk singularity theory is, it's basically the theory that with each generation in My Hero Academia, quirks are going to keep getting more powerful and powerful and powerful until they're going to be too overpowered to even control. The entire world at that point is going to be on the brink of ending because everyone is just going to have overpowered quirks. And I'm not gonna lie, the quirk singularity theory is one of the most interesting concepts that has ever come out of My Hero Academia in my opinion. And that's because it shows us just how disastrous quirks are as a power system, and that at one point or another, they need to go, or else the world of My Hero Academia is done for. Take Eri, for example. Eri is a little girl in My Hero Academia who arguably has one of the most overpowered quirks ever. She is able to manipulate an aspect of time. Her quirk allows her to rewind people's physical bodies. And for all we know, once she gets her quirk awakening when she's older, she's probably going to be way more overpowered and have way more control over time. So if in the current series, we already have characters who can manipulate time to a certain extent and do other things that are very overpowered, can you imagine how overpowered quirks will be decades from the current series? And this is why I'm saying we may get a continuation, because you can't introduce something like the quirk singularity theory and us to know that at one point or another, quirks are going to get too overpowered and the world might end, only not to do anything with it. I feel like that is just such a waste of an amazing concept that was introduced into the story. And the reason why I'm pairing the quirk singularity theory together with the origins of quirks is because I feel like they're closely related. And if a series comes out following these two concepts, it's probably going to cover the origin of quirks along with what's going to happen to quirks in the future. Here is my proposition for a My Hero Academia sequel series or a continuation or spin-off, whatever we may get in the future. First things first, the story will take place at least or around 100 years from the ending of My Hero Academia. And you might be saying, Tizzy, 100 years? That is insane. What are you talking about? Let me explain myself. First off, if the story takes place 100 years from the ending of My Hero Academia, that means all the main characters from My Hero Academia, like Deku and Class 1A, everyone else they're gone, no longer around. And let me say why this is a good thing. If the previous main characters are no longer around, that means My Hero Academia won't risk facing the Boruto issue. You guys don't know what the Boruto issue is. It's the issue of previous main characters coming into the new show and stealing the spotlight of the current main characters. This happened in Boruto so many times where Naruto and Sasuke would come in and completely steal the spotlight from Boruto and the other main characters. So, if the show or the spin-off series takes place 100 years from the ending of My Hero Academia, we won't have that issue. Another reason why I believe 100 years is a great jump is because it will give time for the quirk singularity theory to play out. Yes, in My Hero Academia, currently, we have all of these overpowered quirks. We have Aries Rewind, we have Deku's One for All, Shigaraki's Decay, Stars and Stripes' New Order. Yes, they're all insanely powerful. But the thing is, they're not average everyday quirks. These quirks are so rare to have, especially since they are so powerful. And from what we've seen, on average, people do not have great quirks. More often than not, they're born with terrible quirks. A lot of people's quirks suck. But in 100 years, if the quirk singularity theory follows what it's supposed to do, on average, people should have very powerful quirks. Like, imagine a society filled with people who are overpowered the same way as Bakugo, Todoroki. Imagine Bakugo and Todoroki, and even Deku, let's say, being the norm in terms of strength in the future. And if characters like Todoroki, Bakugo, and Deku become the norm in terms of strength, imagine how powerful the people who are deemed as powerful in that society would be. I feel like that would be an insane series to follow. And obviously, if people become that powerful, the series would have to figure out a way to get rid of quirks entirely. And to do that, chances are we would most likely have to explore the origins of quirks at the same time. If we got a continuation in the future following a storyline even remotely similar to that, we would have one of the biggest questions in My Hero Academia answered, that being, where do quirks come from? And two, we'd be able to explore one of the most interesting concepts of My Hero Academia, that being the quirk singularity theory. And yes, I do know that a lot of people want a story revolving around Deku and his future as a hero despite him being quirkless. And I gotta admit, I want to see that too. But Deku's story is over. Deku changed the world. There is barely any crime. There's barely any villains that exist in Deku's current world. Heroes are barely even needed, as they state in the last chapter. So, if we can't focus on heroes versus villains, we have to shift. We have to think bigger. We have to think about quirks in their entirety, because, like it or not, they are a foundation of the My Hero Academia universe. I feel like seeing a dystopian future society being destroyed by quirks is the best direction that this story can go. We've seen sequels fail, and My Hero Academia, if it does have a continuation, doesn't have to be like that. We can follow a completely new main character that takes place way later in the future, and it will be a completely new, fresh story that will obviously have some elements of the old story. Nothing is confirmed, but there is the possibility of a sequel. Horikoshi has set up plenty of things that he can make a continuation out of. It's just up to him to decide whether or not he wants to continue this story in one way or another. Anyways, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the video and make sure to like and subscribe. And let me know what videos you guys want to see next. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.